Hey everybody, today we're continuing the NativeScript chat series where I get to talk to some of the community members and you get to put a face to a name. If you missed out on any of the chat series that I do with community members and people that are building NativeScript, check out this channel, go back a few videos, and you'll see a bunch of interviews where I chat with these folks. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and make sure you tap the little notification bell so you don't miss any of those videos or any of the tutorials that we do here. Today I got Nathan Walker joining me. He's one of the founders of NStudio, and Nathan comes from a variety of backgrounds. He's a musician, he's done media and marketing, then web design and web development, and then native mobile app development. And of course, now NativeScript. He's also very actively involved in the NativeScript community with pull requests to the core repositories. He speaks about NativeScript, and he's also an author on nativescripting.com. Here's my chat with Nathan Walker. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Alex. Today I got a very special guest. His name is Nathan Walker. You might know him from XPlat, which is a tool that allows you to leverage NX workspaces. He can talk a little bit more about that. He's also one of the founders of NStudio, which is a development shop. They do NativeScript apps, but they do a lot of other different types of application development. He does a lot of community involvement and a lot of PRs into the NativeScript repository. So you've used NativeScript, you probably used his code. Welcome, Nathan. Thanks for being on here.
Thanks, Alex. You know, my background is more based in web development, for sure, for a long time, and in particular, Angular. Had been using Angular since the early days and really have always loved it. So traditionally, always been an Angular fanboy. Prior to that, I mean, if just to kind of what even got into web development is design. And so I started out more just designing user experiences and UIs, and used to do magazine advertisements and print media a lot. And that kind of transitioned somewhat naturally into the web space. And I got deeper and deeper into programming level tasks, in some sense out of force with some jobs that I had, but also out of love. I definitely fell in love with it. And Angular, I'd say when I started doing mobile work, it was definitely something that I found enjoyable. And I had done some native apps prior to a lot of web work, so Objective-C, and also had done a lot of Java-based stuff too. So the Android stack, I'll say, made some sense to me because being Java-based, it made a lot of sense. And Objective-C, I'm actually on the fence that I never minded Objective-C that much, even though I know it's very terse. So I had some of that experience coming into it. And
wow. That's quite a varied background. You have media and print. I had no idea you did that. That's pretty cool.
T-shirts and T-shirts, print media. Yeah, I actually really loved that. The thing I did mention is video. For about 2 years, I did video production, much like you do yourself. I used to do podcast intros for podcast shows, also documentary feature films when I was in Nashville. And a lot of that was based around a music writer in the Nashville scene who used to do documentary pieces, and he wanted to do video editing as part of his repertoire because he was actually a pretty well-known writer in the music scene, and he wanted to transition to video. And so I came in and started helping him with some video editing skills and Final Cut Pro, and we used to do cuts for various shows that he was doing, but we did the Alison Krauss and Robert Plant documentary that they filmed in New Orleans. And,
wow.
Yeah, so that's...
I didn't know all these things about you. I thought... I know you from the NativeScript scene, and we've ran into each other many times at conferences. We did workshops together, NativeScript related stuff, but I had no idea you did all this audio and video and print and design stuff. That's really cool.
It was a lot more dare I say, fun. I mean, that space is a lot of fun, and sometimes I kick myself. But I really love programming, and I love the mobile space. I find it just a lot of fun. To me, it mixes a lot of the background that I've had the opportunity to be involved with in a really nice, like, synergistic way, because mobile, you're dealing with people's touch, their feel. The design has a very big effect on how people feel that app. And so merging like some of that design with the programming, actually trying to achieve an experience that someone really loves and enjoys, is very much kind of mixed in with some of that varied background, I guess.
So at which point did you get into NativeScript after you did your career as a native developer in Android and iOS? You got into NativeScript at some point, right? What attracted you to it?
There is a very particular path for me, and I'll try not to get too off in the woods on it, but to kind of cap it up, a lot of it boils down to this startup I worked for in Portland, Oregon, and the fact that we were doing a whole app in Flash in Flex. And we had developed a really exciting app. We all loved it. It was actually called Pixatel. And we got about 2 years in, and we were on a success train, and then had a moment where Flash was killed on mobile. And that was right at a time where we were transitioning that product to mobile. It was actually traditionally built as a desktop app on Windows and Mac. And this is also why we chose Flex at the time, is because we could actually package it in Win forms on Windows, and we could also package it up on the Mac. And so I was always very interested in the cross-platform space going into that project. And the challenges that brought were always very fascinating to me and a lot of fun. And I think that's where the cross-platform love came originally. And when that moment happened where we were trying to transition to mobile and we couldn't because a technology just got killed, was a huge learning point for me. It was very emotional for the whole group. And from that moment on, we actually did do a native app at that time in Objective-C right at the moment that happened. And it was at the tail end. There wasn't really enough time to kind of save what happened there in the killing of that in kind of what was happening with that product at the time. So from that point on, I really wanted to be involved in something that was future-proof in a lot of ways, but also addressed cross-platform in a really flexible way that in most sense avoided this kind of fear of, well, what happens tomorrow if this happens, right? And so for me, several projects later, when I was in Portland, I was very much involved in the startup tech culture there and worked with various startups all over the place. And really, I like that kind of atmosphere. I like the scrappy nature. I like being able to kind of dig in deep into the woods and figure things out. And that's really where I find a lot of enjoyment. And a lot of those projects all touched on some mobile spaces. And so there was a lot of things kind of going on at that time in the tech space, Cordova and the hybrid and the phone gap, and done many of those. And I can't remember if React Native quite had come on the radar at this time, but it was definitely around the same time that I heard of NativeScript and looked at both, tried both. And the thing that really struck me about NativeScript is that it just uses the platform. It wasn't going in around or boxing you in any way. It was actually using pure platform code. And that really struck me with NativeScript. And not only from the mobile space, but just the nature of that. Just the fact that you could use a unifying language like JavaScript to use the best of what each platform gives you, whether it is the web, whether it's iOS, whether it's Android. And of course, always with NativeScript, the potential's been there for desktop work too. But I love being able to take full advantage of what each platform gives you. And I don't like feeling boxed in. I think for me, when it comes to decision making on how to tackle cross-platform work, to me, it often comes down to bridge and sandboxing. And if there's any feeling of being sandboxed and this nature that, or this thought that I would have to work on a bridge and then tie that piece here to then access this piece here, that to me is always a red herring. And it also feels limiting. And so as far as you can stretch that, and there's nothing that's ineffective about that approach. I mean, I guess it's debatable. You can argue several points one way or the other. But I think to me, I like to feel liberated in working with a platform, and that's what struck me about NativeScript. And the more I started working with it, the more liberating it felt. And sure, every framework has its cons and its pain points, but what is core in the spirit of NativeScript is fundamentally brilliant.
Yeah. That's well put. And of course, the other boxing in frameworks you're talking about are the other ones you tried out, like React Native and Cordova and things like that.
I don't really want to state any in particular, because I really believe every framework has its place. Every option that's out there has a very nice place for everyone. I really do believe that. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. There are certain cases myself that it would make a lot more sense to maybe not use NativeScript and do something else on mobile. It just depends on a case-by-case basis.
What example would you bring? Like, why would you, in what business scenarios would you use NativeScript, and what business areas you would not?
If I'm on a team of 5 and 4 of those developers are highly skilled web engineers strictly and had not done too much direct mobile work, then I would probably definitely stick with something more like Ionic for sure.
So what about the type of application that you're building? Let's say your developers do have experience with some native and maybe web. What business applications would you use NativeScript for, and what applications you would not?
That's the second level tier of decision making, as I see it. I think that can come down to just sheer black and white decisions. There are certain features that may come up on a mobile project that just night and day may either not be possible, although a lot is possible in the hybrid space, but there may be more limitations in edge cases with going with one way or the other. And I think for me, when I'm faced in a feature decision as far as making a framework choice, and I'm thinking about edge cases, if there are edge cases that come to mind that are either present, reported, known about, or could be foreseeable, then I'm going to choose for the most liberating option always, because as anyone knows who's been deep in a client project or just a project of your own, and you run into edge cases, those are the hardest moments to deal with. And you really want to be as free to move in directions that you need to fix those edge cases without any delay.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Nathan does have a lot of experience with these kind of business projects. And he created a new tool called XPlat, which I'm sure he'll talk about in a second. XPlat, from what I understand, allows you to share libraries across web projects, across different kinds of applications, Cordova, Ionic, NativeScript applications. So maybe you can fill in a little bit more what XPlat is all about.
Sure. I can't mention XPlat without mentioning Jeff Welpley, because him and I did get together for NGConf maybe 2 years ago now, to present an idea and a concept. And I think the background that I brought to that idea was a culmination of those past experiences in the cross-platform space, and trying to understand how a single workspace development could share code amongst different, whether it's different frameworks or different platforms. And also the spirit of Angular is very much in those XPlat tools initially. Now we're expanding those to go outside of Angular, as NX now is outside of Angular as well. And so the goal has always been to expand it to not just cross-platform, but cross-framework as well. So right now in NX, you can do React and Angular together. And we would like to bring Vue into that as well. And NativeScript can work with all of those frameworks, for instance. And really any technology that can cross the framework space would be suitable in that tooling. And so right now the tooling supports Electron, Ionic, and NativeScript. And all of those frameworks generally can be mixed with different front-end frameworks. So whether it's Angular, React, or Vue.
And how does one get started with XPlat? How do they check out and get more info on it?
First place to start is NX Workspace for sure. NX is where everything starts. And then once you have an NX Workspace set up, you can then install the XPlat tools in studio.io/XPlat. Has a getting started guide, and that's the best way to get them installed, and then you can experiment out from there.
Okay, and I'll leave a link down below. So folks, check out XPlat if you have a business project that you're doing, if you're doing an application that requires library sharing. This is a very good tool for that. And what do you do when you're not coding? Do you still play music?
Yeah, occasionally. I was when I was in Portland, probably more so. I live in Northern California in Chico now, and I have a guitar sitting next to me that I do pick up and fiddle with and play for my son now. I do still have a desire to actually get and play with a group of folks, and maybe in the future that can happen. But most of the time I have a 16-month-old, and I go and play with him at the park outside as much as possible.
Yeah, that's understandable. Same here. Well, thanks for coming, and I'm really happy to have you on board here. It's been really fun chatting with you.
Thanks, Alex. Really appreciate it.